during the related show are those of the show personalities and guest alone, and not those of Vic Canellis Media Group, its parent, affiliates, or stations. VCMG Live is not responsible for any content, information, or opinions expressed. User bears full responsibility for their reliance on such content, information, or opinions.
Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. With over 20 years of real estate experience and selling over 150 homes a year, Laura Sanders is the #1 RE/MAX agent in the state of Florida for 2021. Join us each week as we discuss how to make money through buying and flipping homes, to renting versus selling, and everything in between. To join the conversation, call in live. 888-994-4995, Studio A.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Every week we talk about something that might help you make some money or save some money or help you just navigate the crazy world that we live in. This week we're going to be talking to an amazing lawyer. His name is Nicholas Fiorello, and he is a real estate attorney, and he's going to talk today with us about what do you do when it comes to pulling permits in your home, and how does that affect the sale of your home. And then we're going to talk about deposits and how deposits work when you're trying to close on a house and the buyer doesn't perform. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here today. So we're talking about two different topics. So let's start with the first topic, which is permits. People typically don't know what requires a permit when, working on their home. So for instance, some people don't know in the city of Tamarack, you need a permit to change out your dishwasher. People, don't be putting toilets on the side of the road.
Yes.
You need a permit to put in a toilet.
Pods, if you put a pod in your driveway.
What?
Something so simple may require a permit. You unassumedly get a pod.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Why wouldn't they tell you that? Is it in the paperwork that you sign?
Not sure.
I mean, we depend on the people that we do business with to tell us what does and what doesn't require.
Using a trusted contractor, provider, anything like that would be super helpful, because if you're using somebody you just find off the street and...
See, but I disagree with you. Let me tell you why. So a gentleman in one of my networking groups, this was about 3 years ago, came to me and said to me, I put a new kitchen in, and it was a house in Parkland, so it wasn't like a cheap kitchen, right? I just finished putting a kitchen in my house, and the contractor said to me that he won't return my calls to finish the punch out list, and I still owe him some money, and he says he's going to file against me. And I said, can I ask you a question? And he's like, yeah. I go, did you pull a permit for your kitchen? And he's like, no. And he goes, but on the estimate it said that if it required a permit that it would be a charge for it. I go, okay, so it requires a permit. He goes, well, how do you know that? I go, because you put in a kitchen. You touched plumbing. You had to disconnect the plumbing to put the counters in. You had to put things back that, you're moving stuff. Like, it doesn't matter, you're putting the cabinets exactly where they are. If you're refacing, that's different. But once you start to move plumbing or change it, take it out, put it back, that's a permit required. So I said, so did he pull a permit? And he said, no. And I said, it says if it's required. It is required. It's not if it's required. It is required.
100%.
If you were refacing and that was what his estimate was, then it makes sense if it's required. You're refacing cabinets, it's not required. So I said to him, so he said the guy was threatening to sue him. And I said, well, I want you to go back to him and tell him, listen, it's real simple. You didn't pull a permit, and you were supposed to pull a permit. And if you want to report me for whatever it is, you're the licensed individual. I'm the consumer. I don't know what needs a permit. You gave me a contract that says if it requires a permit. You're the licensed individual. You know better.
100%.
So you need to, if that makes sense, like you needed to be the one that did the right thing, not me.
Of course.
So, by the way, that worked. He got his work done. And they were able to settle up. But it took him saying, hey, you didn't pull a permit for this work. So you want to report me, you want to do whatever, that's okay. You're the licensed individual. You're going to be the one that's going to get in trouble.
Of course.
Because you know better.
And there's a contract usually that says that. So,
Right. And never do work without a contract.
No.
Ever do work without a contract. Something in writing.
Yeah, always have something in writing because it'll lay out what is expected from both parties. I mean, that's first and foremost. Then it lays out, step by step what will take place. And like I said, it sets expectations for everybody. But as a homeowner, it's also your responsibility, like in this case where you told them, or when they told the contractor to what's going on with the permits, it's the homeowner's responsibility to search. They can call the city. They can call them before the work even started, before they even call, a contractor to see if a permit's required. Number one, I mean, that's so simple. They'll tell you what's needed. Two, you can follow all the permit process with the free search that every city or most
They're
every
all
city
free,
has.
yes.
They're
And
all
some make
free.
them a little difficult, but some are easier.
But if you can't do it online, call them. They'll
Right.
give you a report. They'll give you the inspector or whoever the person is in charge of that permit. They will give you that person's number and they'll give you an update. So you as the homeowner can do that, and you can be upfront with the contractor and say, I know that permits are needed because you already called. Two, I'm following the status updates for the permit so I know if you're doing your job and actually pulling them, actually doing what's needed to close them, and then eventually closing them. And then I'm not going to pay you until you close it per the contract.
Well, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Paying them till they close it. So this happens all too often, and not to throw my mother-in-law under the bus, right? She was a realtor. And I'm always asking questions, like I'm so nosy. And she's always like, that's inappropriate etiquette. But so they got a pool. And I said to them, did the permit get closed out? She just looks at me. I go, I'm just asking. I'm just wondering, did the permit get closed out? And they just looked at me. And I was like, well, they look at me and they're like, well, how would we know that? I go, well, I don't pay anybody their final dollar until I call myself or go online and look. So sure enough, crazy story, permit was not closed. It actually failed. Having to do something with the distance of the fence to the pool, with wires, it was a whole to-do. And they had already paid them. I don't remember exactly, I know it was a nightmare. They eventually got it all worked out. 6 months later, after they finally closed everything out, the pool company went out of business. Talking about that, I sell a lot of stuff in a specific area in Coral Springs that was built in the late 90s, anywhere from 97 to 2001. And I've had 3 homes that were built by Mirage Pools, which is no longer in existence, that were with the builder that never were closed out. Well, guess what? 1997, building codes have changed. Now you're having to bring it to today's standards in order, because you have to go back, reopen up the permit. This is a nightmare.
Extremely. I mean, a lot of the times this comes up when people are selling their homes. And then it delays the closing. You might lose the buyer. You might not be able to close in any way. You might have to close with $50,000, $100,000 in escrow, and then rely on the fact that you have to do it.
And that's another thing.
That all depends on the buyer.
That's why when you're signing a contract, that's why it's so important to have a realtor.
100%.
And not just even to have a realtor, but have an attorney, because sometimes people are like, well, I don't really need an attorney. Listen, I don't discount your worth at all. I use you for other things. I use you in the process. I feel like there's things where it gets to a point that once you go under contract, you definitely should have an attorney once you're getting ready to go to close. For me, if I'm reviewing a contract for them to sign, I don't feel like they need to send it to you to sign. For me. That doesn't mean for everybody, because you don't know everybody's experience. So
you're very experienced.
Right.
You don't have to do that.
Right. So when it says the buyer's agent sends over a contract and it says that they will close out any open or expired permits, I have no problem with that. Nobody should ever have to buy a house with open or expired permits. I agree with that. So that pool issue might be an issue, but I wouldn't buy the house either.
Exactly.
Okay? So I wouldn't expect somebody else to do something that I wouldn't do. But when it says also any unpermitted items, right? what if they change the toilet? Like, now I'm subjecting my seller to have to go back and pull a permit for a toilet that's already in.
Well, I usually suggest adding language when we have a seller or when it's more seller friendly, that it gives the seller the option to close it out first. So then it gives the seller the option to close it out. If the seller wants to, then they'll do it. The buyer can take the property. If the seller does not want to, seller can say, hey, screw it, I don't want to do this. Contract doesn't require them to, just
Right.
requires them to provide disclosures if they know about it. If they didn't know it wasn't unpermitted, then that's on them. But then they have to, the contract only says that they have to help and assist and cooperate. with
Right, if
getting-
it's not that extra
Yeah.
verbiage, because the
So-
verbiage I'm talking about is added
I know. in the
later
additional
on
terms.
by other attorneys.
100%. And what I'll do to protect the seller is I'll make it the seller's option first. And then if the
But
seller doesn't want
remember,
to,
the seller's agent's not writing the contract.
Of
It's the
course.
buyer's agent that's writing it. And by that time, if it even got to you and we go back and send that wording in, now they're focused on it.
100%.
And then they're like, I don't want to do that.
well, a lot of the time you're going to have that. It's a hang up on a lot of contracts, but the seller needs to be protected. So that's why I kind of push that language. Just because it protects the seller, it gives the seller the option.
But
So-
how many realtors push back onto you and they pretend like now they're almost like acting in a sense of being an attorney for their buyer?
A lot of
them.
times they do.
It's like,
they
it's
come back and
crazy.
they argue all the time. And I said, look,
They have no respect.
this language is neutral. The
Yes.
contract by itself doesn't have any language that says the seller has to clear anything or make it so the permits are closed, the violations are closed. It says they have to cooperate. So let's put this is neutral language that I'm telling you. It gives both parties the option. Sellers have the option initially, and most of the time they're going to do the right thing, and most of the time they do the right thing. But we're going to know about these in the first 2 weeks of being under contract. You're not wasting that much time. You get the lien search back in usually 10 days, 10 normal days, not business days. So you're getting it back relatively quickly, right away. Usually it's almost in the time the inspection period is going. So,
Which technically, that's why the contract is always written that during that time, the buyer should be doing it during their due diligence
100%.
in that 10 days. And then if anything comes back after that time, you're kind of stuck with it.
100%. The contract's a lot more buyer friendly, I would say, but when it comes to permits, it's naturally seller friendly. But everybody, when they submit an offer, an experienced realtor is going to put some kind of verbiage in there saying the seller has to close out any permits. When I have the buyer, I put language in like that. I don't put the neutral language. I put language saying that the seller has to clear it.
Yeah.
But when I have a seller, I'm going to protect them because it could be something that, like the pool, something from 95 that is 30, 40
And it's very
years
hard
old.
to close out.
Exactly, because then
And
they're going to have to do work all over. They're going to have to
But
redo the
s-
pool, basically.
sometimes, but yeah, because of all the changes
Yeah,
with the
of
whole
course,
sucking
yeah.
the kids in, but which is crazy. But what I was going to say is that, God, what was I going to say? See what happens when you get older. Because there's so much about this topic that's just so interesting. When you say like, some cities, you cannot pull a permit and then sell within a year.
I haven't heard of that, but that's
At
crazy.
City of Coral
Yeah.
Springs.
Is it? Wow, that's
Now, I've gotten
Yeah.
them to make an exception. That's an owner permit,
yeah. Okay,
not
gotcha.
like a contractor. But the thing is that you could potentially close out, and there's stuff you could get done to close it out yourself, which would be a lot less expensive. And I mean, I'm telling you, like I had contractor quotes to close out the pool permit at $15,000, and this was like 5 years ago. And then the owner was able to do it. It was going to cost like $2,500, whatever the work was that needed to happen, down to even like adding alarms on the doors, and which that's easy. Get that Amazon, it's cheap.
Yeah.
But all these kind of things. So, when we come back, we'll kind of go over this a little bit more, and then we'll move on to our next topic. But stay tuned. We're going to go to commercial break for some of our awesome sponsors, and we'll be right back.
At JK Closing Attorneys, we do all of the same things that a title company does, but with the benefits of being a law office. We can help with residential real estate, short sales, commercial real estate, refinances, 1031 exchanges, and FRIPTA withholding.
Contact JK Closing Attorneys today at 954-332-5500 954-332-3111. Again, that is 954-332-3111.
Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building your dream home, you have a lot riding on your loan specialist. Max Fish, a top 1% mortgage loan officer in the nation, will give you a same-day qualifying quote. Max Fish is committed to providing his customers with mortgage services that exceed their expectations. Ensuring that you make the right choice for you and your family is his ultimate goal. Contact Max Fish today at 954-729-6933 or max.fisch@nwmcorp.net.
You have been watching Making Money with Laura. For more information, contact Laura Sanders at 954-650-0827 or visit her website at theloracell.com. And now back to the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Today I'm sitting here with Nick Fiorello. He is a real estate attorney with JK Closings, and we do some business together, and we're talking about some of the crazy things that we have happened. Like one of them is trying to sell a home where the homeowner hasn't pulled permits. So I guess the biggest question is what is the liability here? Because I was reading Nextdoor, this was a couple of years ago, and I had there was a lady on there that posted and said, I just bought my house and I just got fined for all these unpermitted items in the house. So that's a little scary to me that can happen based on the pictures that were online. The city came in and, you know, obviously they can go back and sue the previous owner. I think that's the Johnson B. Davis case, which is actually at the bottom of our seller's disclosure, funny enough.
It is. I mean, it's a disclosure thing. So if
most people say no.
Most people say no, they might not know. Before we talked about being involved with the contractor. Sometimes they rely on what the contractor's telling. The contractor's like, yeah, we did everything we needed to do. Paid them off, done. A couple years later, somebody else buys the property, they go to sell. You know, realtor posts on the MLS, remodeled home, beautiful new kitchen, beautiful new cabinets, whatever. They're not permitted. Then the city will come back,
see the pictures online from the listing.
Pictures online. They have people on the MLS. I don't know what they, if they're in the MLS or not. They see the listings. Redfin,
maybe they go to Zillow.
They could go to Zillow. They could go to Redfin. They can go to, I don't know, but they see them. They see the pictures. They see the nice description, big bold that the realtor's putting to try to make it a little bit more attractive compared to other properties, which it works. It brings somebody in if there's a new kitchen. But then the city sees, hey, you redid this. There's no permits. 10 years ago, or 3 years ago, we saw it was listed and there's these pictures. It looks completely different. Then they come in and then they might put like violations where there's fees.
Yeah.
They could have been backdated where they're racking up. So, liability wise, it's hard because the seller, it's a disclosure issue for a seller.
Yeah, even like roof repairs, like I think it's over like $2,700 needs a permit.
Yeah,
it's flooring over $5,000 technically needs a permit.
Pretty much anything you're going to do on your house.
No, you can put floors in.
You can, but like, what's going to be under?
But when you say 5,000, like, what if it's like you do this room today and you do this room tomorrow? Like, I get it. Like you're pulling, like we're basically it's, splitting hairs. I get it.
It is splitting hairs, and there can be an argument for both sides.
What's the liability on the agents?
Agents doing what they're told from a seller. So for an agent, it's really what the seller tells you. The seller could tell you, hey, I bought this property,
But let's say the agent looks at the old listing and says, oh, the old listing shows this. Is there any liability there? Like they say, hey, like, or they don't look, or they look later, or like, I guess.
You never know when those pictures are from. Even when it's listed, those pictures could have been before a remodel from the old seller.
Yeah.
They could have a listing up for a year and a half and they redid it in there and never updated the pictures. And then the listing's still there with the old pictures, they never updated it. So It's really a disclosure issue for a seller. It's up to the seller. If the seller knows, then they need to disclose it.
Right.
They need to disclose it to the realtor. They need to disclose it to the buyer. If they know about it and you can prove they knew about it but didn't disclose it, that's where you have the liability on the seller. The realtor knows about it because the seller told them, and the realtor didn't do their job of disclosing it as well. When you know about it as a realtor, you need to talk to the seller about disclosing it, even if it's, you want to protect their interest.
Right.
But you now have information that needs to be disclosed.
But you also have to know what requires a permit.
Exactly. That's a call into
I'm
the
not a
city.
contractor.
Of course. So call into the city. But that's if you know in your head that they.
But I can
told
add it
you-
to the list of things I do.
Of course. But if they tell you they redid the whole kitchen, then you know that that's going to be a substantial amount of money.
It could have been
So,
refaced.
Could have been. But
Could have been.
You never know. Disclosure.
They have some crazy things these days. You can paint granite.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I saw it the other day. I was like, that was cool. So, all
Wow.
right.
Interesting.
So, moving on to our next topic of business is going to contract, and we're not going to have a lot of time, but
Quickly.
going to contract and deposits. Like, nobody wants to give any money.
As a buyer, you want to give a little deposit. As a seller, you want to get a big deposit from the buyer.
But it's hard to get it. They don't
It
want to
is.
give it. So what do you do? Like, okay, I get it. When we were in a seller's market, it was like you tell them what you want and that's what you're going to get. But in a buyer's market, things are taking, 30, 60, 90 days to sell.
Just a different approach. You have to take your offers. Usually you're going to have more than one.
No, not lately.
Right now it's a
See,
little
you're
difficult.
you're on the side of getting them when they're
I
already
know,
under contract.
I
You're
know.
not seeing what, like, yeah, I used to have, which was a pain in the ass. Like, it would be like after the weekend on Mondays, right, during that whole craze, it would be spreadsheet central. Like, here is, what we got going on. Like, this is your 20 offers. The likelihood that happens is not very likely.
My argument is that always ask for more. Ask for the ridiculous to
I
be
ask.
acceptable.
Yeah.
So if they come at you with an offer for $5,000 with a $5,000 deposit, ask for 15, because at the end of the day, if the buyer defaults, the deposit doesn't automatically transfer.
No, it doesn't.
It's a whole process. First, there's negotiations. Say you go out of contract, then there's negotiations between the sides. What if that doesn't come to an agreement? Because you can come to an agreement on a partial or a full transfer, but that has to be an
Usually
agreement.
the buyers don't want to negotiate at all.
No.
So it sits there in limbo, right? So how long does it sit there for?
It can sit there indefinitely.
I think I have money there from like 20 years ago. I'm not joking. I could go back and look.
If
Like,
nobody acts on it, then it can sit there indefinitely. If the seller,
so it never can, like, after like 10 years, like it never goes back to the
well,
buyer?
it depends on what the parties did, what the escrow agent does. The escrow
Yeah,
agent
but-
can send it to interpleader, but initially.
Yeah, but you
you're
don't want
gonna-
something sitting in your account for 10 years.
No, we don't.
So what do you do?
We would send it to interpleader, which is asking the court to basically, here's take the money. The court holds the money. We basically sue the other two parties, and then after.
Oh,
the
you
court,
sue the other to get it out of your account, technically,
that-
whatever you want to call it.
That's how it works. We sue and name the other two parties, and then we step out of the lawsuit, and they fight over it. But then we
But
can
don't they get notifications?
They would, yeah. They would get, served proper notice and everything. It would be an interpleader action.
And what does that
it's
cost?
A couple thousand. So because you have to pay the court fees, you have to pay our office as an escrow agent's attorney fees. Because so if you're looking at a $10,000 deposit, if it's sent to interpleader, that means you tried to negotiate, you went to mediation, you couldn't come to a solution. We asked the court to take it, and then we're entitled to it. You're looking at a couple $1,000s of that, which comes out of that deposit. So
And
let's
then if
say
there's only 3,000 there, it's like.
that's what you're retaining. So
So wouldn't it make sense, like, why would buyers, when clearly, like, if they were in the right, the title agent, I guess part of the problem is some title agents are not run by attorneys, right? So if they're not run by an attorney, how does that work? Like, they come back, wouldn't they, like, say, like, listen, they can't even say, like, oh, this is, like, this contract really was not followed and really
they
it should.
can't give the legal
right.
opinion on it.
So now the buyer's not represented, right? Right?
well, I mean, it's the escrow agent. They're supposed to be the neutral party in a transaction.
Yeah, but they don't want it in their account.
They
So,
don't.
like, how does anybody advise the buyer?
They have to just say, hey, we're sending, if you can't come to a solution through contract required avenues, one being trying to discuss it right after, if you know before the end of the contract you can discuss it, or after, try to come to an agreement, release and cancellation, put it in there.
All right.
Then you're done.
We're going to do this again. You coming back next week?
If you want me to.
I think you need to come back. I think we need to do this from the beginning, because
Okay.
I think we have a whole show here. We have no time left, and we need to let people know how to contact us. So if you're looking for a top real estate attorney with JK Closings, give Nick Fiorello a call at
954-779-5000, and you can email us at legal@jkclosings.com.
And if you're looking for a wonderful realtor, give Laura Sanders a call at 954-650-0827. I am the number one Remax realtor. Oh my God, I can be your attorney for
Not a real attorney.
I went to enough school. Realtor in the state of Florida, and I would love to help you make the most money possible on your home. So call us about our 0% funding for getting your home ready to go to market. So again, Laura Sanders, Remax Direct, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. We're going to bring our buddy back so we could talk about what kind of deposits you should be getting and how to get that money. Till
Thank
next
you
week.
for tuning in for Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827. Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. We look forward to seeing you next week.